most people who are talking about this out there on the internet make it seem like, oh, real estate is so easy. Like, so then when things are going sideways, you're like, if this is so easy, like, why is this going sideways for me? No. But then when you actually talk to real people who are actually successful in this industry behind closed doors, they all have the same story. I guarantee you. Even the best flipper in Alabama, probably in all the Southeast, he would say the same thing, that his first few projects were a disaster. Even after years in the industry, when he started to get into rentals, he screwed up stuff. Like, it is so normal when you're getting into a new industry to make mistakes.
Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show with your host, Eric. Join him on the journey where we explore transformative ideas, confront challenges, and discover new perspectives. Together, let's elevate the mindset and transform your personal and business success. So whether you're seeking motivation, practical advice, or a fresh perspective, you've come to the right place. Join Eric on the Minds Unleashed show, and let's dive in together to empower your mind and unleash freedom.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show. I'm your host, Eric. As always, if you get value out of this, please share this podcast with a friend. And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. I truly appreciate it. Let's get into today's show. I'm so grateful and honored to introduce you to today's guest, Maura McGraw. Maura is a real estate investor and Marine veteran. Welcome to the show, Maura.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. I'm so excited to be here.
Perfect. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And so the first question I want to start by asking you is, how would you describe yourself before and after you did 75 hard and you cold plunged for over 100 days?
Oh my gosh, what a great starting question. So yes, I've only successfully completed 75 hard once, and that was back during the pandemic in 2020. And so like everybody, I was, kind of in uncertainty and floundering during the pandemic, trapped at home. I was used to traveling for work all the time. I was at that time, let me just preface. So at that time, I was a company commander in the Marine Corps Reserves. I was running my company, which was a startup at that time, and I was working on my graduate degree. And we were living in New Hampshire. My husband was getting his MBA at Tuck at Dartmouth. And so I was literally traveling all the time, hardly ever in New Hampshire. But then, of course, the pandemic hit and we were stuck at home like everybody else. And I was going nuts. And I used to go to a gym that I really loved. I was really into CrossFit, but everything shut down. So I had to make it happen at home. So I am a fan of Andy Frisella and his podcast and most of the stuff that he does. So I decided, okay, let's just try to make the most of this weird quarantine time and do 75 hard. And it was my first try, and it was my first and only successful try so far. And I think that just being forced to be at home, I had extra time and you couldn't go out to eat. So I had to cook all my meals. So I was able to carefully track everything, do everything. And it was amazing. It's an amazing program. Most people focus on the physical transformation, which there definitely is a physical transformation after 75 days of working out twice a day. But it was a huge mental transformation and very helpful during that crazy time of uncertainty to just like have something to focus on and really work on my internal discipline and fortitude. So 75 hard was great. Actually, it's funny that you asked that because I just started it again. I'm on day 2 of 75 hard today. So I'm doing it again. Since 2020, I've attempted it a few times and gotten pretty far, but never successfully completed again. So I think hopefully this will be the time. Now, separately, you asked me about the cold plunge. So, if you haven't gotten the idea with, being a Marine and whatnot, like I am extremely competitive person. And my business partner and I, we'd been interested in cold plunging for a while, but I actually really hate the cold. and so does he. But we decide to make a bet with each other of who could go the longest of doing a cold plunge every day for a minimum of 2 minutes. We bet each other $1,000. So whoever lost had to pay the other one $1,000. And we did it for 100. I did it for 135 days. And unfortunately, my business partner won because I got invited on a last minute scuba dive trip to Roatan, and there just happened to not be any tub or ice, and I lost. So congratulations to Aziz, my business partner. I think he did like 137 days or something. But yeah, we did literally 135 days, which was crazy. And that was definitely a new level of mental discipline, different from 75 hard, probably harder in some respects, just because I hate the cold so much. But it was really good. Doing anything really hard is always transformational. And forcing yourself to get in that freezing water every day, man, if you can do that, you know that you can do whatever else is coming at you that day.
Yeah. So you said that you like kind of started 75 hard and then you stopped. What was the one thing that you like weren't doing where you're like, oh shit, I got to restart it again?
So a couple months ago, I made it to day 49, and it was just a day where like everything went wrong in my life that day. So the short answer is the workout. So if you've never heard of 75 hard, basically you have to do one 45-minute indoor workout a day, one 45-minute outdoor workout a day. You have to follow a diet of your choosing, read 10 pages of a nonfiction book, drink a gallon of water, and take a progress picture every day. Those are the main elements of the challenge. So what got me, I think most of the times that I failed was basically my failure to plan. So my failure started when I didn't wake up and do one of the workouts first thing in the morning. For whatever reason that day, I didn't do it. And then just thing after thing went wrong that day with my kids. My husband and I got into a big fight that night, and it just like wasn't appropriate for me to leave this intense conversation and be like, oh, I gotta go get my workout in. Let's like pause on this, fight we're having. It was it was like midnight, and I hadn't done either workout, and so I failed. So it was unfortunate. But I think the lesson I learned is you have to be for me to be successful in 75 hard, you have to get after it first thing in the morning. Like this morning, I've already got both my workouts in today. Started at 5 a.m., like did one at 5, did one at a walk at 7 with my kids. So now I'm good. I got both of them done, and that's way better because unexpected stuff happens throughout the day. So if you leave a lot to get done later in the day, your odds of failing get higher.
Yeah. And I find that your failure to plan the workouts is interesting because you've mentioned during my research is that you are very organized and you say that you're a little OCD. And so was this like failure kind of one of your lessons you kind of had for yourself on like time management and planning?
Yes, that's a really good question. So I am a little OCD. I do have all these little organizational systems that help me keep my life somewhat in control. But I will say I've been undergoing a big shift ever since having my 2 kids. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. So, of course, before kids, I was always pretty disciplined, even as a kid myself. Then the Marine Corps kind of took me to the next level, starting and running my own business, even amped that up a little bit more. But then having my 2 kids back to back really, really has pushed me to try to bring organization to pure chaos every day. And that before I was a Marine, like it wasn't hard for me to get up early in the morning and get stuff done and be organized. But then once I have kids waking up at all hours throughout the night, like going years of sleep deprivation, there was just like probably 2 or 3 of the past years where it's like, on any given night, I'm getting woken up at least once a night. And so then, of course, if you're getting woken up multiple times a night, getting up at 5 a.m. gets exponentially harder. So that I would have to say that for the past several years, I struggled. I was in the 2 under 2 struggle, survival. How do I get my life seeming to be back in some sort of control? It's taken me a full 3.5 years, where I feel like now I have a lot better grasp on things. Finally, a big turning point was my kids sleeping through the night. Once my kids both started sleeping through the night, that was a game changer. Because then I was actually getting some sleep and could function like a normal human again. But it was a long-winded explanation to say that I struggled to figure out how to maintain my organization once I had my kids. Although I think now I figured it out for the moment, but as I'm learning with kids, it's like the minute you think you have it figured out, just get ready for some curveball to come at you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. Is you gotta almost plan in a couple hours of like curveballs, or shit's gonna hit the fan, or emergencies, or what have you. So it definitely sounds like it takes a lot of failures to get to the point of being like, okay, this is what I need to do.
Exactly. That was a huge takeaway from my last failure of 75 hard. I was like, there is no excuse. You have to wake up every single morning early and get at least one workout done first thing in the morning. Because if you leave it and you don't do that, like, the chance of failure becomes high. Everything else is pretty manageable. Like reading 10 pages, you can always fit that in. Once you get started on the diet is actually not that hard. It's the time. Now, for me, the hour and a half of time can be the most difficult thing. So I have to get that managed first thing in the morning now.
Yeah, I also think the water is another one you got to start in early, because a gallon of water is a lot more than you'd think when you start actually tracking it too.
And working out first thing in the morning really helps you with that, because then you're starting to drink you're working out, so you're drinking your water first thing in the morning, and it really helps set you on track for your day.
Yeah. The one thing I also learned about you is that from your time serving in the military, which we'll get into here in a little bit, is that you have this iron will mindset to do something. And so your real estate company that we'll also get into is named Doratus, which means to endure, which you've also said is a marine leadership principle. And so I want to understand, like, how did you practice Doratus on your cold plunging days, on Christmas Eve, Christmas, or even on 75 hard, where you're like, okay, I don't have time, or it's really hard to work out, but I'm on day 70 or something like that.
Well, that was such good research. Yes. Okay, let's start with, so my company is called Doratus, and that is a Latin word that means to endure. And endurance is one of the Marine Corps leadership principles. And I think it's such an important principle to success in anything. In business, especially in my business, real estate investment is a long-term game. Despite what some of the gurus on the internet might say, it is not a get-rich-quick play at all. It's something you have to start with the intention to be in it for the long haul. I'm talking like 10 plus years minimum. So endurance was going to be important from the very start. And it's been so important because starting a business, no matter what type of business you start, is very hard. Especially your first few years are so hard. You encounter so many challenges, so you have to endure. And I think for the most part, for most people, if you just endure and you never give up, eventually you will succeed. Like, through all the setbacks and the challenges that you encounter, you will learn. And as long as you just keep going, you eventually will succeed. So that's why I love the name Doratus and the principle of endurance. Of course, that was so important in the military as well. You have to endure and outlast the enemy. And, the Marine Corps is infamous for its extremely rigorous training and training you to be, to last longer and better than your enemy. And we do all sorts of crazy things to train endurance, both physically and mentally. And that has served me so well. Like having that mindset of, I'm never going to give up. I will find a way to accomplish the mission. That was honed in the military, and that has served me so well in business. Because let me tell you, like the first year, especially, but even the first 3 years in business are very, very hard. And if you don't have an iron will, it can be very easy to give up and think that you're just not cut out for whatever you're doing. That's just not the case. This is the rite of passage as an entrepreneur is a lot of hardship in the first few years. You have to get past that to reach your success.
So what did you, I guess, kind of learn about yourself, like doing that cold plunging on Christmas Eve, on Christmas, right? Because like if you want to ask, like I don't want to cold plunge or work out on either of those days. So like how did you make sure that you like stuck with it on those days that were more geared towards, family?
Okay, what people wanted me to say is that like the benefits were so great that I just had to keep doing it. That is a lie. What kept me doing it was my fierce competition and an absolute hatred of losing. And knowing that my business partner was doing it and that if I didn't do it, I would lose to him and have to pay him $1,000. That is what kept me going because there was many nights where I would have to do it late at night. Just because of whatever with the kids. And that is what fueled me. I was like, I cannot let Z beat me. Unfortunately, he eventually did. But that is what fueled me most days was just hating losing.
That's fair.
I hate losing more than I hate the cold, I guess.
That's fair. And you also had a pretty good wager in there. It wasn't like $20 or
No.
$50 or you're like, you guys made it something substantial. And so I think that's what makes it makes the drive a little bit higher.
Yeah, the stakes were high.
So I'd love to actually kind of dive into some of your military experience. So you kind of talk about like what was your role in the Marines and also like why did you join the military?
Great question. Okay. So I joined the Marines right out of college. So I graduated college in undergraduate in 2010. So at that time we were at war. And so throughout my undergraduate, I was always interested in politics and defense. And I did a bunch of kind of defense related internships, which I found interesting. But I would look around me in these Washington, D.C. offices, and there's just this look that a lot of the bureaucrats have. And it's like they look 10 years older than they are. They're unhealthy. They're stressed out. Everyone's a borderline alcoholic. And I was like, okay, this is interesting work, but I cannot spend my youth like sitting in these offices and becoming like this. I was also a college athlete. I played rugby in college. I was like, in my mind, I was like, something ideal for me would be a job that is both mentally and physically challenging. And there's not a whole lot of those out there. And because we were at war and I was an Arabic minor, I was like, okay, I would love to go into, some aspect of defense that also had a significant physical component. So I looked at some of the agencies and the military, and I actually had several good friends in college who were veterans. My school, I went to George Washington for my undergraduate degree. They have a great yellow ribbon program. So a lot of veterans that were coming back from the war would come and use their GI Bill at GW. So I met a ton of Marines in my classes, and they encouraged me. They're like, you are a tough chick. Like, you might be well suited for this. So I started talking to a recruiter when I was a junior. And by the time I think first semester of senior year, I had like signed all the paperwork and decided that, of course, if I was going to go into the military, I had to go into the most crazy, hardcore branch. I never even considered any of the other branches, to be honest. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all out. So yeah, as a junior, I talked to the recruiter, signed all my paperwork. So I knew what I was doing right after graduation, went to officer candidate school, which is like the officer boot camp in Quantico. And so then after that, after I went through all my basic training and whatnot, I became a logistics officer in the Marine Corps, which I absolutely loved. Logistics in the Marine Corps is a very broad job, so which was great because actually I had a different job every single year that I was in the Marines for those 10 years. I never did the same job longer than a year. I did all sorts of awesome different things. It's kind of even hard to describe in a sentence what it meant to be a logistics officer, but I got to be a convoy commander. I got to lead an advisor team in Afghanistan. I got to go to airborne school. I got to travel all over the world. It was just amazing. I really overall loved my experience in the Marine Corps.
When you were like a junior in college and you're talking to the recruiters and going through it, did you have like any like self-doubt or like concerns of like, is this the right path for me? Or were anyone in your friend group or family like, oh no, don't do that, like don't go? Or like, did you have any of that, or was everyone like actually supportive?
To be honest, I am so lucky that most people, my parents, most people were very supportive of me. And my poor parents were at this point used to me doing a lot of crazy things. So maybe this wasn't so crazy for them. Like for me, like I did my study abroad in Egypt and Jordan. I was a rugby player. I had really put my parents through it probably up to this point. So I don't think that this was totally out of left field. And overall, they were very supportive of me. And so were my friends. And also it was kind of the time, we were at war. So it was like, we were at war. I was in school in DC where, like everything political seems very prescient. And so I was lucky. Everyone was very supportive of me. So no, I didn't have any doubters or naysayers around me. And I will say, like, I am one of those people that once I decide, vast majority of the time, when I decide to do something, I do it and I don't look back. So I wouldn't say leading up to boot camp, I didn't have a lot of doubt. I was really lucky. My other friends who were Marine veterans, they helped me with training. I made sure that I was really ready to go. I had plenty of time. But I will say, Marine Corps basic training is designed to break you down. And they do it in a million brilliant ways, whether it's physical or mental. So it would be a lie to say that during, OCS and basic training that I never had a doubt. They know how to break you. And that's for a reason. So, of course, there were times when I questioned myself during OCS or during basic training, like, am I going to make it? Of course, I think everybody has that thought at some point. Funny. Okay, I'll tell you what was the hardest thing for me. There was two things so luckily, because I was an athlete, they do physically challenge even the most beastly people. Like, it will challenge you, but I never worried about myself on the physical challenges. What was very surprising to me was how difficult the academic side of OCS was, because you have a lot of sleep deprivation. So you have to do these like fire watches at night and you're always exhausted. So that really does take a toll on your ability to like study and prepare for whatever you're being tested on the next day. And I was, I went to a good school. I was always a good student. So I never even fathomed that like the academic component of becoming a Marine would be a challenge. So that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And then what I was really bad at, and I'm honestly still not great at to this day, is land navigation. And in basic training, you do these epic, like 8-hour land navigation tests that are like miles and miles all over Quantico. And I sucked. I sucked at land navigation. I just could not get it. I had to. And if you fail, so we would have these tests like regularly, these 8-hour tests where you're running with your compass and your map, and you're trying to find this grid coordinate, which is connected to a tiny box in the middle of the woods. And God, I sucked. And if you fail, you have to come back. You get such limited free time in basic training. So this is after boot camp, during your 6 months of basic training. You sometimes get your weekends off, but if you fail your land navigation test, you do not get your weekend off. You come back on Saturdays and repeat the test until you make it. So I spent most of my Saturdays during basic training, just fumbling around in the woods, sucking at land nav. So that was a little bit about that.
That's funny, because I definitely feel like there's maybe probably some like other, I guess, stories you could have as like being in the military. But I guess like I'm curious, like how would you describe, I guess, your like identity and values, like being a Marine officer versus like kind of where you're at today?
It's a great question. So being a Marine, it's definitely strongly tied to it was strongly tied to my personal identity. I think for most Marines, they would feel that way. They, they have some of the best training to kind of indoctrinate you into an extreme culture in the Marine Corps. And you do, once you make it through, you do feel such a sense of pride and such a strong bond with the people around you, because it's kind of a small and very tough club. So especially as a woman in the Marine Corps, that club is extremely small, especially at the time. There was hardly any. So there's a lot of pride that's part of my identity as a Marine. And it's like you wake up every day and you put on that uniform and you need to like bring your A game to work. I always felt like that. I had such a strong sense of purpose in my job every day. I always felt like I was part of something bigger and important, that my work was important, even if I didn't love every second, I thought that, what I was doing had meaning. And the reality is I did love a lot of it. So it was a huge, huge part of my identity. And coming out of the Marine Corps was really, really tough for me. Like, I remember the day I left active duty, like pretty much cried the whole way home. And, I wasn't able to like let go completely at that point. I was still in the reserves for a few years after that. And even when I left the reserves, I was still like, it was still I knew it was the right decision to make, but it was still a hard decision. It was really hard for me to take the uniform off and release that part of my identity and let go of it. It's a lot of veterans will talk about this, is the transition from military life to civilian life is pretty tough. Especially going from the military into entrepreneurship, where you go from extremely structured life to now you are totally in charge of your life and no structure. So it was a very tough transition. I think it is for most veterans. But now, several years into the transition, I feel really good about it. I think because I was quickly able to incorporate new things into my personal identity. So one thing that I did that helped me was I immediately, when I got off of active duty, started graduate school for real estate. So being, immediately kind of walking into a new community in a new industry was very helpful. And then, the reason that I left the reserves was that I was going to have my first baby, and I just didn't want to be in the military once I had a baby. So as I was leaving the military, I was now about to take on a whole new part of my identity, which was to become a mother, which is another very full-on experience. So I think that, having my hands kind of full helped me not to flounder so much. But I would say it took years for me to like slowly let go of being a Marine. And now it's still an important part of my history, but I wouldn't say that it's really my identity anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. And that also, definitely makes sense. And I've definitely heard a very similar message of like that transition from the military to civilian life is really challenging. Um, and I had a prior guest on, and mental health was like a really big topic in that regard. So like, what would you say are your thoughts, like, and opinions on like how people transitioning or can better support their mental health within that veteran community? Was there anything like you did that really kind of helped you out?
What That's a great question. I think that most veterans have mental health struggles, myself included, like at times like severe. I will say that. So, I mean, this is nothing new, but I think just recognizing that there's not something wrong with you, that you're having, depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts. It's honestly, it's so common. It's just something that no one talks about. And I think, having the courage to ask for help. And I think that having podcasts like yours is so helpful because hopefully people can normalize that this is not, people who have these struggles are not, there's not something wrong with them. Like I've had these struggles. I've had suicidal thoughts several times in my life. Like it's gotten really dark for me personally. And to be honest, whenever I've opened up to another Marine or a veteran about this, I I think every single time they have had a similar experience. So I think just trying to remove the shame from it, realize that there's not something wrong with you, and seeking help. Finding, like, if you don't know, I mean, the VA, you can walk into any VA hospital in the US and say that you need immediate help, that you're having like a mental health crisis, and they will see you. I've literally done that. I've literally done that. So you can always find free help that way if you're a veteran. And then also just trying to get yourself the good long-term help you need, like finding a good psychologist, psychiatrist. Medication can definitely help, especially during the really hard times. um you know Being open with it, I think, with your family and friends helps, and not trying to keep it inside and feel shame around it. Those are things that helped me. I've seen multiple psychologists throughout the years. They've all helped me in different ways. I've been on medication myself. So yeah, have had to use all the tools, and I think, I'm just grateful that I did feel that I could ask for help. A lot of people, for whatever reason, like they get down in the darkness and they don't feel that they can ask for help, and it results in the worst possible thing. So I just, the more that people know that this is not abnormal, this is not something you should feel shame about. You just, like any illness, like any other physical illness, you need to seek treatment and help. And, with consistent treatment, most people are able to get better over time.
That's so powerful too, especially on knowing that, these people realize that they can go get that help. And I think you brought up a key trait, which is shame, which, a lot of people might feel that like, I don't want to be a burden to my friends, or I don't want to be a burden to my family. And so like those professionals are, truly and legitimately there for you, which, they could be a sounding board and an outlet for. So I guess I'm curious as well, like if if you had somebody that's maybe they feel that shame, they don't want to maybe talk to somebody, like what would you say that they could do in like their own life to try to, move in a different direction? Like, was there any sort of like habit or practice or, something that they could do?
Well, the first part of my answer will be because I think, and this is not just for men, but because I worked with a lot of mostly men in the Marine Corps, I saw this happen so much where there these, you know, feelings of depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts will come, and they feel that that's very at odds with their role in the world, which is probably to be a leader in their house and a leader in the military. And their first instinct is to perceive these feelings as weakness, like somehow their depression, anxiety is weakness. And it's like, if they talk about it or they bring it up, then they're not being strong for their family or for their Marines or for, whatever community is around them. I think especially for men, a lot of times society has these kind of expectations that make it even a step harder for a lot of men to feel that they can seek treatment. And so a lot of them do try to white knuckle it. They try to white knuckle their way through it, which, to be honest, most of the time is not a long-term solution. Like, there's no, I mean, yes, of course, working out is always good for your mental health. Like, it's, having like the basics of like a good diet, a consistent workout routine, getting outside in nature, those things are always going to be helpful, but I don't think that they are enough to overcome severe depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts. And what happens, unfortunately, a lot of times for a lot of people, especially men, is that they will feel that they can't ask for help because of the roles and these kind of expectations. And so that's when a lot of them will turn to alcohol, drugs, just to try to get away from the depression for a little while. And then the problem compounds. I mean, I can't tell you how many alcoholics I've known in the Marine Corps, and it's like I can understand it because they just want to get like a break for just a little bit from what's all these thoughts inside their head. But then, as we know, that just leads to a worse and worse problem. Then eventually that usually leads to alcoholism. So I think, these, a lot of times the depression or the anxiety, it's coming from something like serious and deep internal that no workout routine or diet is going to fix. There's like there's some, good books that might help, but rarely is that enough. Usually I would say what is needed is probably somewhat long-term work with a professional psychologist or psychiatrist that can help you get through whatever is causing it. Whether it's, something that happened in your military experience, your childhood, like these external things are not going to help you get away from this like serious internal struggle that you have. Like, the only way to get through it is to face it. And that's where getting professional help is so important, I think.
Yeah. It sounds like you got to take that iron will and that Doratus of military and now apply it to your recovery and healing. So that way you don't go down a worse path or a worse rabbit hole or, get into habits and, you know, substance abuse or, just all these other compounding effects that could truly, you know, have an impact on your life instead of trying to do the 180.
Yeah, it's a different type of strength to be able to ask for help. I think maybe like sometimes it's like the surrender, it's realizing that you can't always do everything by yourself. It definitely takes a different type of strength, and probably a greater strength than most things, to get help when it comes to mental health.
Yeah. So today you are a real estate investor. You do, rentals and flips, and you have had a property management portion. And so, I'm curious, what inspired you to get into real estate, right out of college?
So I was very lucky in that my father and stepmother have been real estate investors and developers for many years now. So as a young person, I was able to kind of watch them grow their business. And of course, as a young person, I went in a totally different direction at first in the military. But I was so lucky to have kind of watched them grow their business from the sidelines. And when I got out of the military, I knew that I was like, if I'm going to leave a really cool job that I love, I'm not going to go work in a cubicle for someone else. Like, that's just not what I'm going to do. The only way I can leave this job that I love is to do my own thing and have a business that gives me like freedom and flexibility to ultimately have a family and be the kind of mom that I wanted to be for my kids. So I knew that I would have to build my own business very intentionally in order to achieve that, because it's just, now it's a little more common after COVID, actually. Like, there's a little bit more flexibility in the workplace, but still not to the level that I wanted. So I knew that I was going to have to do my own thing. Luckily, I had seen real estate be that path for my parents. So I knew that. So I just decided I'm going to go all in on this, and it's been overall great. Real estate is a great business to get into for a million reasons. Eventually, like after the first couple crazy startup years, it does provide the freedom and the flexibility that I was really seeking. And it also scales really nicely. As a business, it's like you can literally just start with one house and one project. And as you get better, you just do more, and like you just do a second project and you can add a third. So as a business, it's really great. It scales so nicely. Unlike the property management company, which we can talk about in a second, that scaled out of control. But the investment side, it scales great. It scales nicely. You can kind of go as fast or as slow as you want. Not to say that it's super easy, but it's not overly complex either. I would say that real estate is kind of simple and straightforward. Not easy, but not complex. So it's been awesome for me and for my business partner, for our team. I've loved it, but that's how I got into it. Basically, I saw what my parents did, and when it came time to get out of the military, I decided I wanted to do something similar.
So, like, if your dad and stepmother were not in real estate, like, do you think you would have gone like into a different area because you essentially watched like them be successful at it?
That is a great question. I don't know. I mean, if I didn't know about that path, like, this is something I do think about. I am very lucky that I knew about that path. I don't know. I think that probably I would have found my way to entrepreneurship sooner or later, because I did know, like, okay, I need to do my own thing that's going to allow me to live a little bit of an alternative lifestyle. And, it's really hard to find that in a job. So I probably would have found my way to entrepreneurship. Also, I do come from like a line of entrepreneurs. My grandparents were amazing entrepreneurs, like, in a classic kind of American dream story where they came from nothing and built a very successful company. And then my parents. So I think that, and I grew up in Silicon Valley, so that also, so being around so many people that started their own businesses, I think it was kind of just more part of my upbringing than a lot of people. The idea that you can go out and start your own thing and have it be successful. So I probably would have found my way to entrepreneurship. But if I didn't know about real estate, I don't know. I don't know what I probably would have done something in logistics management because of my background in the military. There's tons of opportunity in civilian logistics management. So maybe that would have been a different path.
Yeah, supply chain is a very big space now. And where I went to school, they even had it as a full major. And Amazon is the first company that comes to mind, right? Or a FedEx or UPS. And the way that they get that process kind of across the finish line is definitely something that it sounds like that you would be doing. And I guess I'm also now curious. So what was it for you that you like kind of witnessed and saw that was like, okay, real estate is a path of like success? And I guess obviously now that you've gone through several years of it, it's become something you've stuck with. So like, what did you see growing up where you're like, this is a like successful business?
Well, I think I saw them start the business, like one project at a time, and then they've grown it into a massive business, a very successful, projects all over the world, multiple apartment complexes, and they've definitely accumulated substantial amount of wealth and built some pretty incredible projects. So seeing it kind of from the sidelines, of course, grow from, a little bit of a simple business to what it is now is very inspiring. They've literally built houses for Adam Levine, like big
Oh,
celebrities.
wow.
They build these amazing projects. So even just seeing their projects, you're like, this is amazing. And I can see their lifestyle. They have a very great, very flexible lifestyle, and they have for a long time. And that is very obviously different from a lot of other wealthy people. If you have kind of your professional executive class, your doctors, your lawyers, your accountants, and again, all these people are very successful, but they don't have the freedom and flexibility that I saw my parents have, where they can get up and travel at a moment's notice. They're always, we joke as a family that we never know where they are. They're always somewhere. They love traveling. So they're always somewhere. We never know like which house to try to send anything to. But it's great. They're like, they're living their best life all over the world. And for me right now, travel is not a priority, but I knew that I needed to have that level of flexibility and freedom because I knew I wanted to have my kids and I wanted to be there for them. I didn't want to be missing major milestones, which is what a lot of professional women really have to wrestle with, like, having to, put their kids in childcare most days. There's just a lot of struggles that come with that. And so having a job that really allows me the freedom and flexibility to be there for my kids, but also be professionally fulfilled, build long-term, like real wealth for my family and my kids now, it's no small thing. Like just for example, on Tuesday, I do have a nanny, so I do need help to be able to do my work, but she was sick on Tuesday and it was no big deal. Like I just cleared my calendar and, in a regular situation, like I think about all the time, I think about if I was in the military and these things happen, like it would be just a nightmare. It'd be so stressful. So I'm so thankful for what I have now. And real estate's been a huge tool to get me here. So I think it is a really good option, especially for parents who are maybe interested in finding a career path that provides an extra level of flexibility. Real estate is definitely one of those ways to achieve it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that real estate is, a great pathway to wealth and also a great way to build up monthly income. Um, what would you, to somebody listening, like, what would you say for somebody that's, they've never bought a home. They don't know anything about construction. They don't have capital. Like to me, I've looked into real estate investing and I've put time and energy and money into learning about it. And I guess for me, like I've realized like my investment philosophy doesn't align with it. I don't want to be bogged down with like the problems. Raising the capital is probably, one of the first roadblocks I think about. All the horror stories you hear about construction and contractors screwing you over. I mean, like there's a laundry list, right? So I guess like how did you overcome like those roadblocks? Because I know that you've had to have faced each one I described.
That is a great question. And I think my advice to someone who is interested in real estate is I would start with really getting clear about what your goals are and what your why is. Because, if you are really wanting like the most passive way to invest, real estate is not it. Even though a lot of people say okay, you can get it to a place where you can build a business eventually to a place where it's relatively passive. But it is not the most passive investment at all. Like if you are busy and you just want to invest your money and get a steady rate of return, put it in the stock market, put it in a Vanguard mutual fund, put it in, there's so many easier ways than real estate, to be honest. So I'm certainly not out here trying to say that real estate is the right answer for absolutely everybody. At some point, maybe I do think that, once you get to a certain level, you have a certain level of wealth. I do think, if you look around, most wealthy people do have real estate in their portfolio for a reason. And there are a million reasons for that. And the tax implications are not a small reason. So I think, look around at wealthy people. If they ever share what's in their portfolio, 99 times out of 100, they'll have real estate in their portfolio. And that's for a reason. But I don't think that it's always the right answer for everybody, especially when you're younger and starting out. Like real estate might not be the best way to get you to your goal. If you're just wanting to like steadily and slowly increase your passive income, save for retirement, there are definitely easier ways to do it. If you want to kind of be more involved and be a little bit more aggressive in growing your wealth and income, and you're not necessarily afraid of some of the challenges, I think that is where real estate can probably fit for more people. Although I will say there are like passive real estate strategies that you can consider. There are REITs, real estate investment trusts, which are very similar to mutual funds. It's just a holding in commercial real estate. So that is a very passive way to invest in real estate. And there are real estate syndications where you can partner with an experienced general partner and you can buy into, a part of a commercial property, and you can get a lot of the benefits of real estate without having to go get your hands dirty and deal with contractors, deal with tenants, deal with all the headaches. And believe me, there are a lot of headaches. So there are some pretty passive ways to get into real estate, and that might be a good first step to see if you like it and if you want to dive deeper down the rabbit hole. So I don't know. This is what people who come to me and ask me this type of question, I've realized that it's really important to start with understanding your own personal goals, financial situation, and strengths, and then looking at all the real estate strategies and seeing like, okay, is there a strategy here that best fits what you're trying to accomplish? If yes, then okay, get a mentor, someone that can show you exactly how to do it. That would be probably the follow-on step. But yeah, that's a long answer. But real estate isn't perfect for everyone. It's not perfect for everyone right now.
So like in your first year, like what did you do to kind of get the ball kind of rolling? Like, were you an agent? Did you do wholesaling? Like, how did you kind of, because you obviously got to build up the capital to buy the home. You got to have money for construction. You got to have processes in place. You got to have, I think, like you mentioned, right, a lot of people do say it's passive, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the furthest things from passive. It's like basically you're buying into a part-time job up until a certain
Or a
point.
full-time job. Yeah.
Yeah, or a full-time job, maybe a little bit of a part-time job, depending on if you're doing rentals and flips.
Yes. Yes. Well, okay. For me, I did a few things, and granted, you have to recognize that I was going into this wanting to be in real estate full time. So I was not trying to do something totally passive. I was like, I'm going all in on real estate. This is what I'm going to do. I started with getting very educated. I did my master's degree in real estate at Georgetown and got surrounded by a bunch of other people in the industry, learned all the basics. And then I got 2 mentors right off the bat. So one was my father, which was super lucky. And what he did for me, he's not a hold your hand type of person and teach you things. He's a throw you into the fire person. So this is how I got to Alabama. He said that he was building a house, like a ground up build, and told me to go manage the build. So this was my first ever project, was a ground up build in Birmingham, where I knew nobody. I had no idea what I was doing. And I literally got thrown into the fire, and it was so hard. I had to learn everything about project management, ton about construction. I swear that first project was a nightmare. Everything went wrong. It was very stressful. It was very hard. But I learned an absolute ton, made a ton of connections. So that was my one mentor. My second mentor I got is a guy named Matt Terrio, and he still coaches and teaches out there. He was a Marine in his former life as well, and now is full on in real estate. So I hired him as a coach to help me, and he did. He taught me how to wholesale and flip, and basically gave me kind of a blueprint to follow. And I took that and kind of made it my own in my own market. But one thing that he told me, and now I realize being in the industry, a lot of coaches tell people this, that, if you find a good enough deal, you'll be able to find the money. So as I was partway through this ground up build, I had started looking for a couple other deals. And my idea and my strategy was to flip houses and then reinvest, some or all of the profits into rental properties. And at a large scale, that's still what we do today. But my first 2 projects after the ground up build were flips. I found these deals through a local wholesaler and a local realtor. I knew how to run the numbers from my education and my coach, and they were really good deals. And originally I had a hard money lender lined up because, fun fact, no bank wants to fund a brand new business. Until you have like 2 years of experience, it's very hard to get bank financing. So I had a hard money lender lined up, this like private hard money lender guy. He ended up backing out like a week before closing. And both of these were closing like within days of each other. It was kind of aggressive. I had like 2 projects that I wanted. I was like, okay, I have 1, now I'm going to do 2. Well, he backed out like a week before. So then I was like, had a real fire under my ass because I now had to find a way to fund both these projects. I had saved going into this. I knew I needed some money. I had saved like 50 grand coming out of the military to fund my new business and these projects, but that wasn't enough. So, and I knew that the banks weren't going to fund me. So I had to go looking for private capital. And basically I had to pitch these deals and pitch like a profit split to just private individuals in my network. And that was a really crazy time. Really crazy story. I pitched a bunch of, at this time also, I was in this I was still in graduate school doing this. I was in this really nerdy competition. They have these like case competitions in grad school. So my team actually was like selected for that. We were in the national finals. So we were like flying out to San Francisco to go present. It was cool. We did end up winning this whole thing, which was cool. But it was literally in the week that week that I had to find money for my projects was also the week of the case competition. So I remember I was like on the plane to San Francisco, like trying to set appointments with people that luckily I did grow up in the Bay. So I knew some people. So I literally like when we landed, I like got off the plane, went straight to a couple meetings with different potential private investors, like ran to the hotel, did the initial round of this case competition, did more investor meetings, like went back to the final round. None of the people I met with in San Francisco ended up funding the deal, but then my contractor in Birmingham said, "Hey, I have a guy that I know that's interested in real estate. I think you should pitch it to him." And Chris, my contractor, introduced me to Aziz, who ended up funding the deals. It was literally like days before closing that I pitched him the deals and he agreed to fund it. And long story short, those deals went after the nightmare ground up build. The first two flips honestly went relatively smoothly and the numbers worked great and he got a great return. We both got a great return on our investment. And he's like, I like this business. This is going to work. And eventually Aziz would go on to become my business partner. We've been business partners for 6.5 years now. So it all definitely worked out for a reason, but it was a stressful time that week. But it did teach me how to raise private money. So I guess it taught me a lot, but that was one of the things it taught me.
So how did you pitch like somebody that you pretty much don't know that like they should give you a lot of money? I'd love to, I guess, really understand that.
So yes, it is definitely intimidating. I'll tell you that. But this is definitely where having the mentor really helped. Because yeah, you're internally kind of freaking out. Like I was kind of freaking out on the plane. I'm like, holy shit, I have all this stuff going on. Like what? But he's like, no, like this is, you have a great deal here. You've run the numbers. You know what you're doing. This for them is going to be a great return on their investment. And it's true. It was because, the construction went relatively, it doesn't happen on most projects, but went relatively smoothly. Like in less than 60 days, he got 18 to 22% return on investment for his money. And so that's what my coach explained to me. He's like, you're not begging for money. This is literally an investment opportunity. You need to show them the numbers, show them the deal, show them that you have a team and be like, hey, if you put in however much money, like, 50 grand for each or whatever it was, in 60 days, you'll have 100, or whatever. I could probably pull up the numbers, but it was a solid return. So he's like, yeah, you just need to pitch the deal and show that this is a good investment. And that's all that I did. That I was confident in my little spreadsheet, and I was at that point, we had been through a lot of trials with my contractor, but I was confident that we had the contracting team in place to make it happen. And yeah, I don't know. It's still a miracle to this. I still think like this also, there was a work of God in there because he not only funded the deals, but then would go on to become my business partner. And this guy is the best business partner ever. So it was like, everything that happened during that crazy time totally happened for a reason. There's always a little bit of luck involved. Let's not lie. Like there's luck involved in business. So I was lucky that he was the one that, I did the same pitch to all these other people. He's the one that said yes. So
it sounds like you had a great contractor, right? Because, if you don't have a good contractor, you wouldn't have met Aziz. And then if you didn't have a good contractor, the construction goes poorly, pretty much, and then if you estimated a $50,000 construction budget, it very much can easily become a $65,000 construction budget by, one or two issues, in a matter of minutes.
Yes.
So like how did you have the confidence in your numbers when you were like going through this presentation? Like, did you meet with the contractor and be like, okay, how much is new flooring? How much is new paint? Like, got very, very specific.
Yes. Okay. Well, he is a good contractor. But you have to remember, I was coming off of this trial by fire, and the first project was not good. We lost $30,000 on that ground up build. So I was coming off of, coming off of under budgeting, blowing the timeline terribly. So I was coming off of that experience and knowing like, oh my God, I need to be super conservative on these numbers, because again, if I'm going to go pitch to people that it doesn't, even if they do know me, it's like, from that experience, I was like, I need to be super conservative. I need to really know what I'm doing if I'm going to take other people's money and, guarantee them some sort of return. So because I was literally still finishing up this really tough experience of blowing a budget, of blowing a timeline. I knew, and me and the contractor had been on that nightmare project together. So we had both had some hard lessons learned. So we knew going into these next projects that we couldn't screw it up. We knew we had to be super conservative, super careful. Yeah, so we were. And through the trial by fire, we had learned our material costs a lot better. We had learned a lot from the first project, which, let me just say for people out there, like, it's very normal for your first project. Now I know this. I didn't know this at the time. I was like, oh my God, am I just terrible at this? But yeah, it's very normal for your first project to be a disaster. Now I know that. But yeah, I think coming off of the disaster, we were very conservative for these next couple projects.
So, like, what would you say to somebody that's like considering getting into real estate and, they might have had that, disaster story or disaster tenant? Like, how did you ensure that you wanted to like keep going and be like, okay, I might have had this failure, but like this still feels like this is the right path for me?
Endurance, baby. That's where it comes. That's where it comes. I mean, it's totally normal. It doesn't feel like it when you're going through this stuff. Because you're like, oh my God, like, am I just an idiot? Because most people who are talking about this out there on the internet make it seem like, oh, real estate is so easy. Like, so then when things are going sideways, you're like, if this is so easy, like, why is this going sideways for me? No. But then when you actually talk to real people who are actually successful in this industry behind closed doors, they all have the same story. I guarantee you, even the best flipper in Alabama, probably in all the Southeast, I know him personally, and he would say the same thing, that his first few projects were a disaster. Even after years in the industry, when he started getting into rentals, he screwed up stuff. Like, it is so normal when you're getting into a new industry to make mistakes, and big mistakes. And you can't think that that is an indication that you are going to be a failure forever or that you're not cut out for it. It's simply a rite of passage in any new industry. And that's the same thing in the military too. Luckily, I had another career before where I could at least have a little bit of perspective. Like, oh yeah, when I was a brand new second lieutenant and I didn't know anything, like, I screwed some stuff up then also. When you're brand new in an industry, you are going to screw up. Having a really good mentor can help you, over those hard times. That's why I would really recommend it. But you have to know that you are going to screw up. Everybody screws up when they're brand new at something. That's why you have to just stick with it and know that you will learn, you will get better. Anyone who is stuck with it and is successful will tell you the same thing.
Yeah, so I guess like from my perspective, like I can't grasp how to like mentally stay the course or, for something like this, like, one or two properties where you're using hard money, which for people that don't understand, like that's usually like a 10 or 15% interest rate. Or you're putting down substantial money, right? 15, 25, 50K. It could obviously be more, which is for majority of people is a lot of money. So like, how do you like stay the course when you're, risking losing money, or not being able to pay your hard money lender, or your $10,000 like over the construction budget, like in my mind, I'm like, this does not seem worth it. I'm working another 20 hours a week on my job. So what would you say to like somebody in that position?
So I think you have to really know going into it, like be resolved, and know, have your eyes wide open going into it as much as possible. Now you can never fully know until you're actually in it. But that's what I will say, like flipping houses is definitely not for everyone. And it is not nearly what it seems like on HGTV at all. So I would not I would not want to suggest that this is the right path for necessarily anyone. And if you do go into one of these very proactive real estate strategies, I would just say you need to go in and understand that you are going to make a lot of mistakes your first year, even if you do have a really good mentor, even if you are extremely educated. I was both of those things. I was extremely educated. I had really good mentors. I still made a lot of mistakes. You have to just, all I can say is that the first year in real estate, and probably in any new industry, is a rite of passage. Get through your first year. Just do whatever it takes to get through your first year. Accept that you probably are going to lose money. And you also have to like kind of know if you have the temperament for it. Like, who are you when your back's up against the wall? Are you somebody that the stress is really going to get to you? Luckily, I knew that I was not that person. I was used to operating in very high stress. I was trained for it. I was conditioned for it. Still to this day, that is my role on our team. My business partner, like I said, he is the best man in the world. I am thank God for him every single day, but he is definitely more prone to like the stress getting to him. And still we have stress in the business today. Because of my background, I was trained to have calm under chaos and be calm under stress. And I've like have this mentality that when shit's hitting the fan and going sideways, like I was just trained for years and years and years that you cannot, that is not the time to freak out. You need to be calm, collect yourself, and realize there is a solution to every problem. You just have to find it and go after it. So for me, that has been like a personal strength that I attribute to the military that has helped me in business. Because there's been many, many times where, yes, we've lost $30,000. It's even to this day, like things definitely get easier, but still, and when you're in construction, stuff is always going wrong. So you kind of have to know whether you are built for that or not. You can't be like, for example, my business partner, we try to leave him out of construction as much as possible, just because a lot of people aren't built for that. A lot of people aren't built to have this stress of like random shit going wrong all the time. Coming from a military background, I'm used to random shit going wrong all the time. And like a weird part of my personality kind of likes that. I like the kinetic aspect. It's probably not healthy, but like I kind of like the excitement of it. I like having a challenge that I feel like I have to figure out. Really, not everybody is like that, and not everybody is cut out for it. So, yeah, flipping is not for the faint of heart. There are way more, like I was saying, there are passive investment strategies where you will have to deal with none of that. Like you can easily buy into a REIT, buy into a syndication, and people are going to take care of those things. Like, so the active strategy is definitely for a special type of person.
I also think it goes to your philosophy as like an investor, like, and also some self-awareness. Like, do you like problem solving, right? When like a problem happens in like your job or your life, like, do you want like the quick solution? Are you one of those like hands-on people, that's super involved? And, I also think knowing, a lot of people probably maybe don't want the added stress in their life or don't want added problems. The real estate joke I always hear is like, you don't want a tenant calling you at 2 a.m. for a clogged toilet. I feel like that actually doesn't happen as often as you think. Like,
Oh, but
especially on the
but some
Not
crazy shit does happen.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of like how many times have I clogged the toilet and called the landlord is probably like zero, right? But like actual things happening for sure. Um, so I think that's like the two components that I would say where you would actually have to like truly think about those.
Yeah, rental properties, unless you get a really bad tenant, I you know, I could really go off about the rental properties because as you mentioned, I was hardcore into property management for a few years. But a lot of times if you have a good property manager, that can be a relatively good passive investment for a lot of people and a really good way to build wealth. As long as you find a really good property manager that's going to really carefully screen your tenants, select good tenants, take care of your property, like that can be, I don't think it's as bad as some people think it might be.
No, I think the landlording side isn't as bad. But I know you've mentioned the property management portion of your business. So can you tell that story about your class action lawsuit?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So, okay. Before I get into these nightmare stories, let me tell you, I do to this day, we have a rental portfolio of 55 properties. We in-house manage all of our stuff, and it takes relatively little of our time now. So before I tell you about all the nightmares, let me just tell you that on a day-to-day basis now, like our rental portfolio is very easy to maintain. We have great tenants. It brings in a great amount of monthly cash flow. I love it. My favorite part of the business. But there's some great stories from my time in property management. So let's get into it. So I do on my podcast, I tell some of these stories in depth and hopefully they are entertaining. But in 2019, I was growing my investment business and we decided to buy a big portfolio of 42 single family houses throughout Birmingham. It was myself, my business partner, Aziz Shanara, and another partner that we brought in for this deal, Danny Gonzalez, who is a broker. And this deal in and of itself was crazy, but it was a big step for our business, a big step forward. At the end of it, between the three of us, we had a pretty substantial rental portfolio. We had worked with several property managers throughout the Birmingham area. We weren't particularly happy, or we just didn't have the level of service that we wanted. So we thought, okay, we probably need to just start our own property management company. How hard could it be? Turns out really, really fucking hard. But we did it. Luckily, we didn't know what we were in for. Danny, our business partner, he definitely took on the lion's share. He was the broker. You need to be a licensed broker to have a property management company. But we were all I was all hands on deck to start this property management company because we were starting with over 50 properties. Between the 42 property portfolio and our other holdings, we started the property management company with about 50 properties, which it was positive because we were cash flow positive from day one. It was negative because we really had to hit the ground running. Like we had 50 properties, 50 tenants from day one that we needed to take care of. So we had to get everything together really quick to make it happen. Then what happened over the next 3 years was insane. We grew from 50 properties to over 600 units in less than 3 years with zero paid marketing whatsoever. And that is a testament to the extreme demand for good property management in our area. Any of your listeners who might be in real estate investing may know it is actually pretty difficult to find a good property manager. So we did zero marketing and our business grew like crazy. And, if you're an entrepreneur, a lot of times seasoned entrepreneurs will tell you, like, be careful that you don't scale too quickly. And when you're young, you're like, oh, that would be a nice problem to have. And having grown our other business, we grew Doratus relatively steadily. We had a couple of big spikes in growth, but like it's been consistent and steady, manageable growth. With the property management company, it grew insane. It grew like crazy. So we were able to hold on from like 0 to 300. And that happened probably within like a year and a half, going from 0 to 300. We had to hire people, frantically building all these systems to try to maintain a good level of service. There was a lot of stuff. I mean, and in property management, there's always, crazy things happening, a raccoon infestation, like crazy evictions, just normal stuff in property management. But we were doing well from 0 to 300. Then a contact of mine approached me about taking on 3 apartment complexes here in Mobile. After some consideration, we decided to go for it. In hindsight, that was a mistake, but we did it. And we took on these 3 apartment complexes. And even before the catastrophe that I'm about to tell you about happened, they were a big challenge. They were in these kind of rougher areas. I had to carry a gun and my dog with me pretty much everywhere I went. We had shootings at the buildings, fires, floods, you name it. Like, I personally had to evict several drug dealers. I mean, it was full on. But then something would happen that would literally take this to the next level, which is that we had a building completely flood. So one of the buildings was plumbed with this PVC that ended up being part of a class action lawsuit because the PVC was manufactured incorrectly to the point where it became so brittle that it would like crumble apart. So one morning, as I'm getting ready for work, I get a call that a pipe's burst. Okay, like not great, but also not totally out of the ordinary as a property manager. So I have 3 like plumbers on call. I called them, got them over there, turned off the water, started to deal with the leak. He turns back on the water, and the initial pipe burst is fixed, but then another one bursts. And then over the next 24 hours, we would have 10 different pipe bursts. The whole building would get flooded. As the plumbers, at this point, I have like all 3 plumbers on site trying to deal with whatever the hell is happening. We're and it's like crazy because it took me 24 hours to really figure out what was happening, because as they would fix one, more pipe bursts were going off all over the place. And I didn't know about this class action lawsuit until later, but I noticed that as the plumbers were trying to fix all the different pipe bursts, like the PVC was just like cracking and crumbling apart, which is something that we had never seen before. But long story short, the whole building flooded. It was an absolute disaster. We are down here in the deep south where we have high humidity. So even though we got a water mitigation and restoration team in there, immediately you have the risk of mold exposure and black mold spreading throughout the building. We had to shut off the water because, as you could hear, like every time we turned back on the water, more pipes would burst. So, essentially we had to condemn the whole building and force all the tenants to leave because it was uninhabitable. We couldn't have the water on. The mold threat was pretty much immediate. But it was an absolute disaster because here in the city of Mobile at the time, and even now, we have a huge affordable housing shortage. And this was an affordable housing apartment complex. So these people had nowhere to go. And we literally had 100%. I think we had 1 room vacant that we were able to move 1 family into. But other than that, we had nowhere else for these people to go. Everybody is freaking out, obviously, because their stuff's getting destroyed. They have nowhere to go. Like, emotions are just so high. People are freaking out. They called the mayor. They called the news crews. For like every day that I would go to work for a couple weeks, like a news crew would be there. Like now my normal job as a property manager, I was now like this crisis PR person. I had to go on the news. You can look it up. There's some great footage of me like pregnant, like trying to explain to the news crew, like what has happened here. It was insane.
Jeez.
It was absolutely insane. It was an absolute disaster. But, eventually we did have to have everyone leave because it was unsafe to have anybody living in that building. And eventually everyone did find a place to go, but it was a total nightmare for several weeks. And that was really what it was like the sign from God that I needed to get out of the property management business, because it was kind of the opposite of why I got into real estate. You know, I wanted a free and flexible lifestyle. Property management was not that. So I ended up taking a buyout from my partners and just I had to leave for my own mental health, which it was the best decision. But the property, like, nothing. The sad thing about this is, like, no one did anything wrong. It was just literally this freak accident, you know, this freak thing where these buildings were plumbed with faulty PVC, and now everyone has to deal with the fallout. No one necessarily did anything wrong. It's just like one of these really unfortunate events that happened. So that was my time. I did 3 years in property management, learned a ton. I'm grateful for it. I'm a better real estate professional for it, but now I'm grateful every day that I am not in it.
So like what happened to like those people? Do they like, are you required to like find them housing and pay for it? Or like, are you like, does the building just get like destroyed? Like what happened?
Great question. So the building and the people are two separate cases. And this is a great lesson learned and takeaway that I talked about in my podcast. So luckily, the owners who own the building, they're an investor group and they had a good insurance policy on the property. They had an umbrella liability policy. So the building ultimately was taken care of by an insurance claim. Now that the whole building had to be replumbed, and replumbing a building entails like cutting out sheetrock in almost every room of the building. All the flooring was destroyed. So it wasn't just replumbing. It was like almost rebuilding all the inside of the apartment complex. So it took months. But that was mostly covered by the insurance claim. The huge lesson learned is that the tenants are covered by their renter's insurance. So, of course, we as the property management, we require all of our tenants to have renter's insurance. There's a clause in the lease that states this, they have to sign. But a huge lesson learned for me was that is not enough. Like now, if I had to go back and do it all again, I would require all the tenants to bring me proof that they actually have renter's insurance. Because when it came down to it, I think only 2 or 3 of them actually had renter's insurance. And depending on your renter's insurance policy, that's going to cover, you know, any damaged property. A lot of times renter's insurance will cover your moving expenses. If you have like temporary lodging, that is all covered by your renter's insurance. It is not covered by the owner's insurance policy at all. And this was a huge point of contention because obviously all these people are so upset. No one just has like hundreds or thousands of dollars lying around, you know, very few people. And so everybody is understandably so upset, and they wanted the owners to have to pay for all these expenses that they were going to incur. But legally, the owners are not required to do that. Owners are required to take care of the building, and the tenants are required per their lease to have renter's insurance. And so the fact that a lot of them didn't have it was really unfortunate and should honestly be a lesson learned to any renters out there. It's like, this is also just about insurance. It's like insurance is kind of one of those things that you don't need it until you really, really need it. And if you are a renter, have renter's insurance, because you never know if something like this happens. The $100 a month will be well worth it if a catastrophe ever happens like this. And just know that the building and the owners are probably not going to cover you. They're not legally required to. At least in Alabama, they are not. And the owners, I mean, even though the insurance claim did ultimately cover the costs of the building, there's the whole initial period where the claims process is going on, where the owners are having to front this enormous cost. So everybody was in a really tight, bad position. The owners did eventually, I think they ended up giving the tenants each like $1,000, or something to try to help. So they did go above and beyond, but still, understandably, most people said that wasn't enough. And housing, it was really hard to find at this time. I was working with all of the local housing agencies and connected everyone, but there wasn't like a great option where a lot of people could go. It's like everybody had to individually kind of find their own solution, which was not ideal. But that's a little bit about how it got resolved.
Hmm. I know renter's insurance is not like $100 a month. It's maybe more like it's less than like, I think some people might even pay like 10, less than $20 a month. So it's definitely affordable. But it is actually interesting, that you mentioned that of like who's responsible for the building and then who's responsible for the stuff inside that apartment, right? Because I think, somewhere like Alabama is also very prone to hurricanes. And so when that happens, it's good to know, you need pretty much your, oh shit, insurance policy is pretty much, what it is.
Absolutely. Our area is prone to hurricanes. So down here in Mobile in the south, we have hurricanes, and then up in Birmingham, where we have the other part of my business is subject to tornadoes. So, and
Oh, wow.
to be honest, like most parts of the US have, not all, but a lot are prone to some sort of natural disaster from time to time. And it's just one of those things where you never know. And you're right, renter's insurance is not expensive. But, like for a lot of people, it can seem like an unnecessary expense. But I definitely saw enough things go wrong over those 3 years to just adamantly say that renter's insurance is worth it. Like get renter's insurance. It is worth it because if you should ever need it, it'll be so clutch.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that you have 55 units. So I'd love to understand like what does the business look like today? Like how many flips are you trying to do a year? How many rentals are you trying to buy? And then like what is your goal for, this year, but then also next in terms of the rentals and flips?
Okay. So right now we have 4 main lines of business in the company. We do our flips, which is if you ever look at my stuff or my social media, that's what you'll see the most of, simply because it's the easiest thing to show on social media. We do about 20 flips a year right now. We would like to scale that up. But right now that is solid for us. We have a rental portfolio of 55 properties. They're mostly single family houses. We do have 9 duplexes and a triplex in there. So all kind of smaller, but that is great. It brings in between $40,000 and $50,000 a month in revenue, which is amazing. It pays for all of our overhead, keeps all the lights on. It's consistent monthly cash flow for us as the owners and all of our employees. So to be honest, that's the part of the business that I love. It's hard to show. It's kind of unseen. It's hard to show that on social media, but that is a great part of owning real estate. Plus a lot of tax advantages to owning actual real estate. And then we have a lending part of our business, which is almost 2 years old now, where we realized through working with a bunch of contractors in our areas, we have a bunch of Hispanic contractors, that they don't necessarily qualify for traditional mortgages a lot for whatever reason. A lot of their business is in cash or whatever, but they are very credit worthy. They just don't meet like most bank standards. So we've started a lending line and a rent to own program to help. Right now, we just mostly work with Hispanic contractors in our areas to help them have like a different path to home ownership. So that has been really awesome. And then we have a little new, still pretty new education line where I teach people how to get started in real estate investing. And this came about just simply from so many people over the years asking me the same questions over and over again about how to get into real estate investing. And so at a certain point, I was like, I just need to put together a comprehensive package of, if I could go back in time, exactly how I would get started, how I would do things based on all the hard lessons learned. If I had to go back and start it all over, this is exactly how I would do it. So I made a little course that teaches people how to do that. So that's how the business looks today. And you
That's
asked
awesome.
about the future. So like I mentioned, this is a long-term play for us. My business partner and I, we have no intentions of selling the company. We intend for it to be privately held and hopefully passed on to our family, our children later on in life, maybe. But so basically we have revenue goals. So our goal for this year is to do 3 million in revenue overall. And then our 10-year goal is we have, between 40 and 50,000 in passive income from the rentals every month. Now we would like to get that to 100,000 in monthly income. And then we would like to get our annual revenue to 10 million in revenue. So those are our longer term goals that we are working towards right now. But yeah, that's a little snapshot of the business.
That's awesome. It sounds like, we've got the real estate component in terms of the lending, the education, the rentals, this pathway, towards financial freedom. And you did mention that education component. So like, what would be that kind of high level advice that you would kind of give somebody looking to get into real estate? I know that you've mentioned like a mentor has been like the number one most important thing, but it also sounds like you gotta have great relationship with contractors. Is there maybe anything else?
There's a lot. So it's hard to answer it nicely in one question, which is why I ultimately did create the course, because I would spend like hours on the phone answering this question with people. But one thing I will, now I really like to start, like I want for other people, I want real estate to help them achieve their personal goals, but everyone's goals are slightly different. So one thing, I can even send you the link. I now, as part of my course, and your audience can take it for free, I made like a little quiz where you fill out, your current, financial situation, your goals, your strengths, and it helps match you with a real estate strategy that would best help you achieve your goals, but also play to your strengths in your financial situation. So if you're worried like, oh, like I don't have thousands of dollars saved, like how am I ever going to make it? Well, there's actually certain strategies that are going to work for you, even if you don't have a bunch of money saved, or if you are not inclined towards, project management or construction, there are other strategies that are probably a better fit for you. So, the first step is getting clear on that so that you're going down a path that actually is going to help you achieve your goals and fit with your personal skill sets and strengths. So I'll send you the link to this quiz. People can just check it out. It's a free little quiz. Is the quiz perfect? No. But it's at least a good starting point for a conversation. And then my course, I go through an overview of all the main real estate strategies, because a lot of times people just they immediately think house flipping and rentals. Well, there's actually a lot of other real estate strategies out there, from the very passive to the very active, and a lot of stuff in between. So, there's probably a strategy that would fit best for each person depending on their situation. So that's step one, is figuring that out. And then step two is figuring out your target market, your budget, your strategy, how all that fits together. Then step three is getting your business set up, assembling your team, and then the next step, I teach you all about financing, how to raise money, how to raise private money, how to work with banks, all things money, because that's very important. And that's something that a lot of people are intimidated by. Then I have a whole section about insurance, like how to use insurance to mitigate your risk. And then finally, I'll help you get your first deal under contract. So that's my goal for people, is if they take the course, they can they'll come in and be able to build a business plan that's kind of tailored to their specific goals and needs, and then get their first deal under contract. And I just built it because so many people asked me this question over the years. So if you want, you can check it out, doratusacademy.com. I'll send you the link to that quiz. So if you're just curious, it's like a 5-minute quiz. You can see what strategy might fit your goals and strengths the best. But yeah, that's a little bit about the education side of the business.
Do you also want to plug any sort of course promo code to get a discount on that?
Yes, I would love that. So if you're listening to this and you would love to check out the course, we'll do code Eric. I'll make that code, and we can do we'll do even up to a 50% off code for your listeners, because I love real estate. It has really done a lot for my family. I think that it can really do a lot for a lot of people as long as you have the right strategy and the right mentor. So I would love to help more people get into it.
That's awesome. So you heard it. Use code Eric, and you can get what you said, up to 50% off that course. That's a really good discount, actually.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'd love to get into the last part of the podcast, which is our signature question. It's a question I ask every guest. And it goes to a topic I've truly battled in my head. I would ask all my friends about it. And it's really understanding, like, what is happiness and what is your life's purpose, right? And so how did you realize that your purpose was real estate, and that work was fulfilling for you? It was your gift and something that you're passionate about.
I think that happiness comes from realizing your full potential in this life. And I think that evolves and changes over time. But I think dissatisfaction comes from when people feel that they are not living up to their full potential and they're stuck in a place where they feel that they are not using their abilities and talents. So real estate is part of my happiness, but it's certainly not all of my happiness. A huge part of my happiness comes from my family, my husband, and my 2 kids. So I think real estate is part of me living my full potential, in that it challenges me mentally. It keeps me really mentally sharp. It forces me to use a lot of my strengths, like my kind of grit and fortitude and ingenuity and creativity. I get to use a lot of different parts of my brain in my job every day. I get to work with people that I truly love to work with, which is rewarding. And I get to really reap the fruits of my labor. So the hard work that I put into my business, I get to reap the reward of that. It's a really good part of having your own business. That if I put in the work and I stick to it, there's usually a financial reward, and there's other rewards too. There's to me a satisfaction of building a team. I find even satisfaction in doing my flips, of taking a house that is usually in pretty bad shape and making it look amazing, like bringing that house up to its full potential. I find satisfaction in that. So my job does bring me a lot of satisfaction. I do feel that it's pushing me to I don't feel that I'm at my potential yet. I feel I still have a long ways to go, but it's always forcing me to learn more, be better, talk to all these different people, constantly learn. But it is just one aspect of my life, being still a new mother has challenged me in a totally different way and caused me to realize that I have a whole nother aspect of my potential to go after. But on a daily basis, I'm super lucky to feel mostly happy, because every day I do get to do work that I really love and enjoy, and feel like I'm building something for my future and my family's future. And then I also have the flexibility to be with the people that I love the most, which is my family. So yeah, that's my answer. I think happiness has a lot to do with living up to your full potential.
I love that answer, and kind of the different kind of buckets where you get that joy and that happiness. And I think that's like really important for, honestly, everybody, right? That's what makes it enjoyable to kind of get up each and every day.
That was a great question.
Awesome. All right, Maura. Well, that wraps up this episode today. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your journey. Where can listeners go to find more about you?
You can find me at Doratus Properties on all social media platforms. That's my company. I would love for you to check it out. Give us a follow. You can see all of our different flips. And you can learn more about our Doratus Academy, our little education platform, if you're interested.
Awesome. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to DM me on my socials for any feedback. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very grateful and appreciate you. And thank you, Maura, for joining me here today.
Thank you, Eric. It was a lot of fun.